principal of Our Lady Secondary School, and what was your background in education before becoming principal of Our Lady Secondary School?
Right, I became principal in 1988 and I retired in 2002, so I was 14 years as principal. My background in education, well, I was reared on a small farm on the north of County Tyrone, northeast Tyrone on the Donegal border, and I attended the local primary school there. But when it came to secondary education, my parents had a problem because there was no secondary school within a 25-mile radius. So eventually they decided to send me as a boarder to St Columb's in Derry. And I went there in 1954, and it was a bit of a culture shock for me because I came from a small primary school into a school with 1,000 pupils, which was a very big school at that stage. But it was a very good school and a very interesting place to be. And there were some very interesting people there in my time. John Hume had just left. Seamus Heaney and Seamus Dean were senior students in the school at that time. And in my year in St Columb's, Eamon McCann and Phil Coulter were there. So it was a great education. A boarding school at that stage was a difficult place to be, but I never sort of regretted having gone there. After doing the equivalent to the Leaving Cert in 1959, I went as a clerical student to St Patrick's College, Maynooth, spent 1 year there, and then I went to UCD and did my degree and finished that in 1962. And then I went to Queen's University in Belfast to do the Diploma in Education, and that was 1963. And then I came down to Castleblaney and got a job as a French teacher in the boys' secondary school, and I taught there for 8 years before the amalgamation. So that was my history in education.
Why did you want to become principal of Our Lady Secondary School?
Well, I imagine there are a few secondary teachers start out wanting to become principal. So therefore it's kind of a progression of influences and people and ideas kind of along the way. And because I was there sort of at the amalgamation, I had two principals. I had Father Frank McKenna and Sister Margaret Lyons in my time before I became principal myself. And I was very influenced by both of them. In Father Frank McKenna's case, it was largely because he had the foresight to see that 3 secondary schools wouldn't survive in Castleblaney, and he started the negotiations with the Sisters of Mercy here in the convent to amalgamate. And now the sisters weren't mad about the idea in the beginning because they felt that they didn't really want to see 100 boys landing on their doorstep in September. But eventually, anyway, they agreed, and the schools amalgamated in September, and it was a very pleasant amalgamation, really, and things went very well. And I don't think anybody else other than Father McKenna could have succeeded, because he didn't involve the Department of Education at all until the summer, when he just told them, well, these 2 schools are going to amalgamate. There was nothing really that they could do about it at that stage. So then, when we got up here, I was very impressed by the commitment and dedication, and indeed the generosity of the sisters, because they had been providing education here for years, but when the school needed buildings and that sort of thing, they very freely gave sites for all of their schools. And because the Department of Education wasn't providing funding for schools at that stage, or very little anyway, they put their own money and their salaries back into it again. And they were very generous to us coming up from the school. Like, the convent became a home from home for us. We had our board of management meetings there, we had our parents' association meetings there, we held all our interviews there, and we were made very welcome. And Sister Ursula became our treasurer, or bursar as it was then. And then in 1974, Sister Margaret Lyons became principal, and she had great foresight and was great ideas into what a school could be, and what it took to make a good school. And she started off with the building program, and in her time the general purpose area and the gym and the old all-weather pitch were all constructed, and the only grant that we got at that stage was for the general purpose area. So there was an awful lot of fundraising, and fundraising became sort of a big part of all of our time sort of in Our Ladies to try and get the school up and running and to get the buildings in place. In 1984, the vice principal of the school, Jerry Gallen, died suddenly and very untimely, and then the position of vice principal came up and I was appointed in 1984, and I got an opportunity to work closely with Sister Margaret Lyons, and I could see sort of her vision for the school then. So when the position of principal came up in 1988, I felt that I was in a good position to take over because I had seen the good work she was doing and that I could be able to continue with it. The only thing that sort of daunted me a little bit was the fact that I was the first lay principal, and I wanted to make sure that the vision and the values and the ethos of the Mercy Order would be continued. But I was sort of comforted in the fact that we had a very good staff here who had bought into all of that over the years, and we had a very, very good religion department. And I felt that sort of there would be no difficulty continuing with the ethos of the Mercy people. As well as that, our own children in 1988 were very young, and my wife assured me that if I wanted to take the job, that she would stay at home and mind the children and sort of allow me sort of the freedom to go out and to attend meetings and all that sort of thing. So becoming principal in my case was sort of a natural kind of progression, and one that I haven't regretted.
What are your main memories of your time as principal of Our Lady Secondary School?
Well, I've had many memories over the years. I suppose we had great academic success. We had many students who did really well, some of them getting their 6As, and then we had many students who just got their 6Ds, but that was their potential. So seeing students reach their potential was what was important, really. We had great success too in sport, in football and in basketball, but especially in basketball. And we were named the Irish Basketball School of the Year in 1996, which was a great achievement for this area because basketball didn't really have any great tradition in this part of the country. They had great success, boys and girls, in basketball in the 90s, and they won a number of All-Irelands, culminating in winning the All-Ireland Under-19 A team, senior boys basketball championship, and allowing the school to be represented in the European Basketball Championships that year in Athens. So that was a great achievement. I remember clearly too buying our first minibus and feeling it was great to have the freedom to go to matches and come and go as you went, and our PE teacher here at the time, Jerry Smith, was delighted with it. The building of the concert hall was a great highlight for me because we needed a concert hall because we just didn't have anything for cultural activities in the school. There was no funding from the Department of Education, so we started fundraising and we raised $186,000 by way of a draw where the tickets were £100 each. The concert hall was opened by President Mary Robinson in 1993, and that was a great day for us here in Our Ladies because we knew that from now on we could stage the musical every 2 years, and we would have place for all the cultural and artistic activities that happened around the school generally. I have great memories of all of the fundraising events in the school, the bazaars, the Parents Association dances, the guest teas, the sponsorship walks. They were all great fun, but they were a lot of hard work, but they raised a lot of money for the school. Reaching the magical number of 600 students was very important, and we were delighted when in 1994 the student numbers went up from 588 to 650, and this gave us a lot of Department of Education entitlements. For example, an ex-quota career guidance counsellor, and that was very important to the school at that time. I always got a great thrill from opening the post and discovering that one of our students had won a competition, be that an art competition or a project competition, or very frequently a school's essay competition, because we had great success in the European schools competitions over the years. So it was a little thrill at the beginning of the day.
What did you find most challenging about your time as principal of Our Lady Secondary School?
Well, because of the expanding numbers, a priority for me as principal was to find accommodation. And I remember many frustrating visits to the Department of Education where you would meet one minister after another who'd tell you, we don't have any money. So you'd have to go home and feel, well, there's nothing we can do about that other than continue the fundraising. So there was a really big fundraising campaign on, and as I mentioned earlier, we had the 180,000 draw to build the concert hall. Then the Parents Association organised a draw to build a new basketball court opposite the gym. And then we got 2 new classrooms for the special needs students. And because we weren't getting any funding from the Department of Education, they allowed us to build 8 prefabs. And during that time as well, we got a new roof on the gym, and we got a new roof on the 2-storey building. And as well as that, they replaced some of the old prefabs. And they allowed us sort of to do certain constructive changes around the place, but very little funding, and the only funding really came from ourselves. There was always a challenging time in the school when a student died, or when a past pupil died, or one of the staff died, and like every school, we had to cope with that during our time there, and I found it a very challenging time for the students, and indeed for the staff and for everybody. My last big challenge was in 2001, 2002, when the ASTI strike took place, and the students kind of at that stage decided that they kind of would go on strike too. And on a few occasions they left the school, and I found that a very challenging time.
How much did education change during your time as principal of Our Lady Secondary School?
Well, generally speaking, there are frequent changes in the curriculum, and I suppose the biggest change during my time was the introduction of practicals and orals and orals into the system, and that brought a great change in those areas. We introduced a number of new programs in the school. Sister Joan had a class for special needs students. It was established before my time there, and it was very successful and I think it's still very successful in the school. We introduced the Junior Cert Schools programme and the Leaving Cert Applied programme for students who didn't want to go on to further education. We had a secretarial course. That was largely girls who took it up, and they again didn't want to sort of go past their Leaving Cert, go to further education. So it was very successful, and it changed in further years to called the Careers Foundation course. And a lot of the girls in that course got jobs locally by virtue of going out on work experience, and because of their expertise that the employers kept them on and found work locally. We introduced the LCVP, which was an option for Leaving Cert students. And then, of course, the big one was the transition year, which we introduced in 1998. We had a lot of meeting and discussion with staff and parents, and the big decision was whether we would make it a compulsory transition year or whether we would make it an optional one. And eventually we settled for compulsory, and I think it's still compulsory in the school. And I think it was a very good decision because I think most students need 6 years in secondary school nowadays. By the end of my time in school, technology was beginning to take over.
What did you enjoy most about your time as principal of Our Lady Secondary School?
Well, I loved the job. It was hard work, but it was very rewarding, and there was never a dull moment. It was great to see students reach their potential and to be able to progress them in their path of life. And it was always great to hear the success of our past pupils. I was blessed with great support from the boards of management, and we had tremendous staff who really worked very hard to see the school progress. We're very grateful to the Sisters of Mercy for all of their support, and while they were much less involved as time went by, they were always there to lend a helping hand. Probably my greatest enjoyment and satisfaction came from the building of the most recent extension that was opened in 2000. It wasn't surprising that it won an architectural award from the Institute of Architects of Ireland, because the architects there went on to become very famous, and they did a great job for us. And I was very pleased that it turned out so well and became really the hub, and is still the hub of the school. Finally, I was very pleased that at the end of my time in Our Lady's, there was no debt on the school, and that indeed there was quite a favourable balance in the bank.